you don't. I think we can already tell you'll have things to say. So
Yeah, this will be fun. Cool. Well, we are live on.
I didn't say it'll be fun. I said he'll have things to say.
Yeah, we'll get into a fight right off the bat. Live on Facebook and YouTube. We're here with John Vitti. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
It is perfect. People
Nice.
usually slaughter it, so I appreciate that.
Doesn't seem like it's that hard.
Not that complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to talk about an idea.
Can I say Vitti?
I hear it.
Has that ever been said?
I'm sure when you were 12, that's been said.
I was trying to think how it could be.
I got bullied a lot. They'd call me like shitty Vitti. Yeah, like tender vittles, which I think is like a dog food thing.
Nice.
I don't know, but then that was
This is your chance to clap back at all those haters right here.
I got bullied a lot, but that
call them out by name.
That got me to learn how to be confident, and then it taught me how to like fight too. So now I love fighting.
And all those children are dead now.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, that's a great way to frame up this idea that you've got an education space.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we're still. Yeah, we're still behind the scenes here. So I'm going to ask, what made you want to come on the podcast?
So I was talking to our PR firm about it, and they were chatting with some ideas, and I was like, I want to talk about the future. And I think the future, it's really important. I think the future is all about education. You guys actually have this cool construct where we talk about, I've never heard it before, but I've actually wanted to create a kind of a school or college about kind of like what you're doing, where it's not just like books and here's a test and fuck off. It's more of like, hey, let's actually really have like a working session, come up with a business. You know what I mean? So it's literally what I'm going to talk about in this.
Awesome. Podcast. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to have some, I'll say it again. We're going to have some fun. Maybe Ethan won't, or maybe he'll try and sabotage us.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to hit record here. Oh, it says that it's still running health checks for you, John. Can you hit refresh over on Zencaster?
Let's see.
I'm going to record over on Zoom as well.
How do I? Okay, let's see if this works.
While we're pulling this up, this is behind the scenes. If you'd like to hear the polished version of the Run With It podcast, subscribe to us. Comes out every Thursday. John's episode, I think, will be out in a couple weeks. And looks like your health check is passed. So ready to record. There we go. All right, let's do it. Welcome to Run With It, the show that brings you untapped business ideas from successful entrepreneurs. My name is Chris Justin, and I'm here with Ethan Janney. Ethan, how's it going today?
It's going well. I'm wondering if Randy's listening. Our friend Randy told us he was listening to the podcast, and then we were like, he's like, oh, it's getting better. And I was like, cool. Well, what did you like about it? And he said, I can't think of anything right now. I said, name one guest that we had. He said, I think I got to Google it. So Randy, if you're out there, hopefully either you're being made fun of and you will never know it, or you can tell us that you heard this.
I can already tell the theme of this episode is going to be calling out people. Like John had mentioned that behind the scenes before we hit record, that he got bullied a little bit for his last name, which
a lot.
Okay, sorry, I didn't want to sell it short there, but yeah, so, we'll name drop here.
So yeah, should we give an intro to?
Yeah, let's do it. Tell us about John. Here? Yeah,
John Vitti is the CEO of Versus Game, a pop culture gaming app that lets users bet on trending topics. They've granted over 16 million in cash prizes, and over 7 million players have won prizes from this. Can I just say that again?
Go for it.
I'm just going to say
you really wanted
again.
to mess up his name. I could tell. You wanted to say.
I like choked there because I was like, wait, Chris said it and he said it was good. Am I going to say it like Chris said it? But Vitti,
yeah,
right? Yeah, Vitti. That's fine.
John, we do have
another one. And it's all coming back to me now.
It's all coming back.
Dying soon.
John Vitti is the CEO of Versus Game, a pop culture gaming app that lets users bet on trending topics. They've granted over 16 million in cash prizes to over 7 million players. But he's here to talk with us about a new idea that he'd like to pursue in the education space. Chris, did you do some research on the education
Yeah, I did.
space?
So the idea basically is an online school for entrepreneurship that anyone in the world can attend for free. And I want to frame up this, give some context to this idea here. In my opinion, modern education system is broken. A lot of people have this system, especially have this opinion, hold this opinion, especially higher education. Student loan debt in the US is over 1.7 trillion alone. And
I think
at the
most
same
of
time,
that is mine, but that's okay.
at the same time, productivity growth has stagnated. So it's not like we're seeing a higher return on the amount of money that we're spending on education. People are more in debt than ever. And yeah, we're just not seeing the fruit of that. This is a big problem that everyone knows about. VCs invested $10 billion in 2020 alone, and that grew from $5 billion in 2019 in the education space. There are 24,080 education startups on AngelList. So there's a ton of competition in this space. And well, I should say there's a ton of energy going after this problem. John, tell us what made you come up with this idea.
I think higher education is a complete waste of time for most industries and topics that you want to get a degree in.
Wait. Can we start over, John? And for the podcast, we need you to be opinionated. That makes it most entertaining for the guests.
I'll pull it back. It's bullshit. I think it depends. If you're a lawyer or in the medical profession, I want you to read a lot of books and study hard for sure. If you're going to open me up, right? But when it comes it comes to business things, which is the entrepreneur, aspect. You need to put those books away. You need to start doing things, like doing the actual thing. So I think it's ripe for disruption. I think there's just too many people reading and doing their MBA programs on other people's businesses. And you only see a small piece, a fragment of that business too. Like you read these business books, it's like, oh, I had an idea, came up with it on a napkin in a bar, and now I'm on my yacht. It's complete ridiculousness. That's not how it goes. It's never a direct line. It's never a straight line. And so really want to open it up and shed some light on all that and really let these students get into it, get into the weeds. That's really what I want to come from. I think education should be absolutely free, of course.
Yeah, that's, I fully support this idea of experiential education, project-based learning. We've actually had a handful of episodes already of people who are successful entrepreneurs who'd like to do something to improve the education system. They've got their complaints, especially within hey, how do I just manage my life? How do I start a business? Just kind of basic skills around finances, financial independence, things like that.
Yeah, finance, how to negotiate, how to sell something, how to create something, how to bring a team together, how to go ask for money, all that, I think part of it would be really cool on how to make it free, because all of it still costs money, is you get sponsors. You get sponsors from the sponsorship from these big corporations that eventually want to go and hire and tap into the brain trust that, that we're building, right? And then those kids, those students should go out and sell to those sponsors to bring it in. So a full loop there.
So that's interesting. That's interesting too, because there's a trend here in some of these larger corporations just sort of creating their own education system, basically. Like I know Google, probably Amazon, maybe IBM. These I know Google for a fact, but several of these companies are just we're going to create some courseware so that people know exactly what we need them to know so that they can do the job.
Yeah, that's the thing. So all these big, amazing companies like Google, they're already kind of doing something like this, where they bring in anybody in like computer programming, right? A computer science degree. It's like, get them in. It's like, great. They're smart. They're cool. Get them in. And then we'll teach them the ropes along the way. So it's like, all right, let's do that. But before, like the only way to teach someone and for them to learn is by doing it, right? So let's have them do it right away. That's the only way to learn.
Yeah, it also seems like a lot of what's, I don't know, this could just be my opinion, but a lot of what's holding the education system back, holding students back, is really their own misunderstanding of their own potential and how to go about optimizing it, right? So
I
first of all,
wouldn't.
they underestimate what they can do. And second of all, they don't really understand what's the path. How would I go about achieving that? And it's never about, not necessarily about the specifics. Like you said, it's not about, oh, if you really like what Chris and I started a podcast, right? We didn't need to memorize terms about podcasting in order to start a podcast. We needed to start a podcast, and maybe we learned some of those terms along the way and they just happen to go in our memory. But, if we teach children and, high school and college students that in order to do something, you have to kind of do the research on it first. The research is more about the planning, and that's important. But I think people need to know that things are possible and actually just how to execute them. And then the details. Google hires people just that have achieved things before, and have some sort of proactive, action-oriented personality.
Right?
I don't think that
And
we
the
should
first
put
step
it.
with that is awareness, I think.
Yeah.
To achieve.
I don't think that we should put it so much on the students themselves. There's this idea that if you follow the path that's laid out for you, then you will be taken care of. And kids don't know enough to know that that's not actually true, right? If you want to become an entrepreneur, or for many of the higher paying jobs in today's societies, you can't just follow this traditional path. Some of them you can, like you talked about, lawyer, doctor, engineer, et cetera. But I think that it's an uphill battle to say, hey, you need to figure out how to do your own project-based learning when you're spending so many hours per day having people give you the rubric and having to follow through on it. So paint a picture of what this actually looks like. How does this?
So wait, I'm just quick question, Chris. Were you saying that that's what I was saying, that it should be do your own project-based learning, or are you just commenting that in general?
I was commenting that it seemed like you were implying that it's more on the onus is more on the individual to figure out this issue. And I think
well, what I was trying to communicate is that if we're going to teach people and we're going to train people in things, it's about how to learn, right? It's not teach you the things, it's how to learn, how to execute something. And so I think you could have courses, or you could have, a specific mentorship program that people go through, or an apprenticeship program. But the focus is not, learn the facts and have the research done so you can do the thing. It's about what is the process, what is the kind of model that you can follow, as opposed to the specifics. So I don't think it necessarily puts the onus on the individual. It really, I think it's the contrary. It gives them the power to feel that they can do it. Not like, oh my gosh, what do I do? It's all on me. It's like, oh, if it's on me, then now I know what to do. That's kind of the way that I was envisioning, just to be clear.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the best way, what do you guys think? I think the best way to do that, to achieve that, like teaching someone how to learn, is by having them do it in a collab environment, whatever, but having them actually, it's like going back to like a medical experience. If I have a doctor that's going to operate on me, do I want a doctor that got straight A's in Harvard or wherever doctors go, Johns Hopkins, right? And they got straight A's. All they've done is they're like studs, brainiacs, or have they, been inside people and maybe killed some people, like operating on them and successfully help them out and they're alive.
Let's slow down here. Let's slow down. I like how we have to be careful about saying that they killed people.
No, not, you know what I mean?
That just makes it sound like they're a doctor and then on the side they like to kill people.
I don't know what they're doing in their free time, but they're not reading anymore. But I would want that person, that doctor, that's actually operated a bunch, because they've failed, they've succeeded. It's the same thing. If I'm hiring somebody in my company, I don't care if they went to Harvard. I want to know their success stories and their failures first.
Yeah, I think that's a theme, and I think that people talk about failure being important, and we don't have to harp on it too hard. But I think one thing that we could cover that's a nuance of it is like, when is it okay to, I don't know, share about your failures or not, things like that. So that's a really great example of like a doctor, right? A doctor is a person who, yes, you probably have more confidence in them if they've had a lot of experience or about to do an operation, but you certainly don't want them to talk to you for 15 minutes before they do the operation. Hey, and by the way, here's this guy that I killed. Here's this guy that I killed. And here's
Teams
the
roll
third
off.
one, right? Oh man, remember when that happened? So I think, I don't know. I think it's useful. I will say, I'll just a little bit contrary to the failure breeds success type of thing. If you go on record as failing multiple times, you start to develop a reputation, and people don't want to work with you. So I think it's there's
Oh,
there's there's a delicate line to toe there in being willing to fail, and like how it gets publicized. And yeah, here's a really good example. One thing that I think that I've learned in my process of becoming an entrepreneur, like let's talk about email marketing. I really didn't realize that it, and this is maybe seems obvious in retrospect, if I'm going to fail, I should fail to like a small group of my email list. Like if I want to test something out, let's send it out to like 15 people, or let's like have a phone call with them so that I can talk through what the email is going to sound like, and I can bounce it off them and see if they get offended, versus like sending it out to an email list of like 2 or 3 thousand people. And then they go, what the heck is this?
that's what we teach you in school, in our new
Exactly.
school. Yep.
Like how to fail, but how to fail like,
Small.
smartly, right?
Yeah.
Fail small so that you can win big. Yeah, interesting lessons like that I think would be super useful.
But I think that whole failed conversation, how that told that line is interesting. I think that I think it's almost the other extreme where people hide it. They never want to talk about their failures. And then what happens is people freak out and they're paralyzed on making any moves because they're like, well, no one else is failing, or as I've never read a book about anybody failing, so then I can't make a move and because I might fail. Right. So if we were just a little more honest and transparent or open about it, I think it would do the world good, but not just walk around being like, I suck all the time or half the time.
Right.
I
Yeah.
want
And
to
I would just say on that note too, I mean, we're almost like, it doesn't have to be this, but we're sort of building the curriculum here, right? Like maybe you talk to people about failure and how did it fail in the right way so that it's
Yeah.
productive. And this thing that you shared that I think is interesting is, what, again, things that I found through my experience, there's places to talk about your failures, right? And there's places to not talk about them. And so like that, a part of that education could be, here's a group that we provide, right? Where everybody's actually encouraged to share about things that are not going well. And you take a special consideration to make sure people understand that it's private and that there's not going to be sharing among other people, but that here's a place where you don't have to hide that things didn't work out, and you can
Yeah.
bounce it off other people. Like that's another piece of, say, a school like this where it's not necessarily memorizing and taking a test, but it's an ingredient that you could systematize, you could make a part of the system.
I
Sorry to
would
cut you off,
literally
Chris.
ask
Yeah.
if I was the professor, I'd be like, all right, the first question, first day to this new students, I'd be like, what was your biggest failure? And if someone's like, I dropped an ice cream cone, I'd be like, you're not an entrepreneur. Like you need to have thick skin and you need to have tried and swung for the fences. You know what I mean? It can't just be like the fail small and fast to learn is very important, but you need to actually have some real fails in there as well.
let's get into some examples of how people are taking this on right now. One that comes to mind is the Teal Fellowship. I'm sure you guys are familiar of it, but for the listener who isn't, the Teal Fellowship gives $100,000 to young people who want to build new things instead of sitting in the classroom. So he essentially, Peter Thiel, famous tech entrepreneur, one of the co-founders of PayPal, he'll pay you $100,000 if you win this fellowship to either skip college or drop out of college. One of the most famous winners of this is the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin. It's all in the news right now because Ethereum is just blown up, but that obviously has has worked out pretty well, even if that's the only project that was successful out of all those fellowships that Peter Thiel founded. Huge value added to the world. Mm-hmm. Ethan, you brought an example of Acadium.
Yeah, Acadium is a great education resource that Chris and I have both used, and this is something that's actually close to my heart when I think about my big dreams for how to change the world and something in entrepreneurship. There is something around education for me. It's slightly different from what John's bringing to the table. But I think mentorship is super important, and I think on the job work is important. So I use a team from Acadium for a project of mine right now. So this is the way Acadium works. They actually do a little bit of training. They're mostly young people. They're all over the world. They could be in Africa, India, Spain, Turkey, whatever. And they match them with people who have small businesses. Mostly they do marketing apprenticeships just because it's a really easy thing that there's demand for. And so you can have an apprentice for like just a few $100 a month, and they'll do things like do your social media strategy or update your website. They're learning, and so it's not perfect, but you do get, if you know how to manage it right, you do get good work, and they learn a ton. So I really appreciate that type of model, and I think mentorship needs to play a stronger role in the future of education. But so there's somebody that's doing something that's going fairly well. From our perspective, we've had
Yeah,
the founder on our podcast before as well.
Yeah, that was episode 66. Talked about smart face masks, which is another idea that actually came to fruition, not from a run with a listener, but you see a bunch of versions out there costing $100 and doing all sorts of sharing all sorts of metrics. So yeah, there are a couple examples. We talked about ones in the later stages of people's life. There's also thinking about this problem of alternative education. Montessori schools immediately come to mind. I think, Ethan, have you enrolled your son in Montessori?
Yeah, my son's in a Montessori school. It's a very small one. It's actually run out of someone's house, but it's actually official. And I don't know, we think it's been great. I mean, he's relatively young, so we don't know how he's going to turn out. He could be a complete failure, but just kidding. I would never say that around my son, not until he's old enough to get jokes like that. But but anyways, it's what's really cool about it, which we like. Number one, this isn't a Montessori thing, but they speak Spanish there, and he's learning Spanish, but he's with a bunch of kids from different ages. He's got kids that are a little bit younger than him. He's got kids that are a little bit older than him, and they're all just hanging out, and they have the freedom to do different things than you would typically do. They've brought in like literally circus people to teach them how to do acrobatics as like a thing that they do kind of for fun. And on top of that, this thing, I mean, I don't know if this is a thing, but they helped potty train my kid, and they were able to do that because they had the different ages of kids going on. So there were other kids that were a little bit behind him in his training process, and there were other kids that were a little bit ahead of him, and they could just kind of like, you could see those examples and do stuff like that. So we don't usually get that type of thing in traditional education. That's just one thing I can think of in Montessori, where you can see who's a little bit ahead of you and you can see who's a little bit behind you. And there's actually an advantage to hanging out with both of those groups as opposed to just, who's at your quote unquote level.
I hope you sent them a thank you gift.
For helping potty train?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a dirty diaper, but it's fine.
What's the age range that you would want to focus on for this idea, John?
It would be high school and college. That it would be just a big block, kind of what Ethan's saying, like all together.
Yeah, I guess I also have a young son, and I'm thinking similarly to Ethan. Like, how do I don't think that the typical education system, we very specifically chose a daycare facility that is not going to try and make them sit down and follow some rules and learn how to walk in a straight line and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm more on board with what Ethan is describing from Montessori perspective, and it seems like that is actually that is the foundation that is going to make a much bigger impact long term for an individual. But this idea itself, in terms of having it be successful, it probably would be more successful, and certainly the latency is shorter if you're working with people who are closer to working age. So there's a little bit of tension, right? Maybe 10% of people or 5% of people still have the skills that would allow them to become entrepreneurs once they are filtered all the way to high school or college. So it's a smaller group, but can make more impact.
Yeah, I think the schools, the traditional, like rigid schools are great for breeding like corporate workers. You know what I mean? And that's great too, but it's for entrepreneurs, you need to have like a pretty weird free mind, you know?
So that makes me think almost of the trade school model. I know in high school, you guys probably had this as well, but some kids would go off and spend half their day learning a trade.
Yep.
You could do something similar for entrepreneurship, right? You don't need to spend, if you know that you want to be an entrepreneur, go spend half your day shadowing someone or working within a company, trying to actually contribute, solve problems.
Or trying
Yeah,
to
I
sell
think
Pokemon cards to your fellow students.
bingo. Literally.
I mean,
That's,
actually, to be honest, that's the type of thing that the kids who become entrepreneurs do, right? But it's actually the thing that gets discouraged in school, which is interesting, right? Oh,
no,
what are you
literally
doing
they,
over there?
yeah, you're not supposed to like try to sell stuff to your like peers and friends and stuff like that. It's
Which I
crazy.
guess there's I mean there's some etiquette there that is useful to teach, but I don't know. That's actually a really good point. Like, is there a way when kids sort of display this entrepreneurial bug in school that you can both kind of help them understand etiquette, but also reinforce it? You know,
That's a
like
cool
because
idea.
yeah, if a kid naturally is selling stuff to their peers,
That kid's
that's
awesome.
a strong signal. That's a strong
Yeah.
signal. And they're going to keep doing it no matter whether you approve of it or not, because they're probably like a born entrepreneur. But yeah, how can you say, okay, let's work with this? Like maybe we can help pair you up with a experienced entrepreneur to help you learn something interesting.
That's a cool idea. I like that idea. I'm more of like a mentor thing. Yeah.
Here's a great idea. It's like a Teal Fellowship for like early childhood education, and it's send us your kids that are trying to sell stuff.
Those kids would be those kids would be so like genius level by the time they get like in their 20s. Can you
Exactly.
imagine that?
Exactly. I'm going to start this. I think we're going to start this someday. We can do it as a group here. But yeah, that's the thing. I'll give $100,000 to any kindergartner who's trying to sell something at school to quit
Yeah.
school entirely and become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Like when's the last time and like in the companies that I have like looking at grades, like grades are completely useless. I never look at a GPA. Are you kidding me? Like for all the kids out there worrying about their test scores and stuff, like nobody looks at that. No corporation looks at that. You
I
know,
got to tell you guys a story because I've taught at the college level, right?
oh,
I
nice.
did a little bit of subbing at
I
the
felt bad. I just
well, no, it's fine. I mean, but
no.
I had a student, and she got a B. She got a B in biology lab, and she earned the B. She did, the numbers just worked out just like any other student. And she sent me an email, and she said, I don't want this B. Like I wanted better grade, basically. And we went back and forth, and I wish I could go. It's almost humorous to the degree to which she kind of said. So she said, I got a B, like I need an A, you don't understand. And I said, listen, B's are great. Like it just means you're pushing yourself. I'm sure there's plenty of A's in your future. She sent me an email back that literally said, you can't tell me A's are in my future. If you give me this B, B's will follow all my life. So anyways,
Wow.
I know, right? So these kids get intense in school to get these grades, right? And remember, I guess they are proving that they're a negotiate. We're talking about negotiation skills, right? Like maybe they're
Well,
like,
that's more complaining,
yeah,
not
yeah. It's
interested.
but this is part of the problem with grades is but there's cheating is so rampant. It's so rampant that you can't even really tell what's reasonable to expect from a kid in a class just
Wow.
because people are cheating off each other's papers and people come into office hours or whatever and that which is great for people who are working a little bit extra hard, but actually get, they get that extra special attention. And so they know exactly what's going to be on the test. There's a lot of complications in terms of how grades actually display whether somebody's going to be good at something or not
Right. A
anyways.
grade doesn't mean that it's not a signal at all, actually, to saying that you're going to be awesome at this thing in life later. It just means that you're good at memorizing words and numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So
You
how
know,
do we,
the mind-blowing thing to me before we get into how we actually turn this into action step, that's where you're going, Ethan? Or
yeah, I was going to say, yeah, how do we
yeah,
get
yeah.
started? But
Mind-blowing thing for me is in terms of world education rankings, the US is number one. we're ragging on the US system and
Oh
how
yeah,
bad
technology
everything is,
better.
but we're actually
Are we?
the
Are we
top of
number
the
one?
list.
Who's ranking that? U.S. News and World Reports.
US News, US is number one
in the U.S.
in
News. What about?
educationsystem.com.
Yeah, I'm curious about whatever Sweden News and World Reports or whatever how it comes out. China News and I'm sure in China News and World Reports that they're the top education in the
you're
world.
right. All right, let's get into the action steps here.
By the way, and that could also I mean, this is just stating the obvious, but the connection to what I was saying earlier is very very clear, right? Like, how do you get to the top of the education system? This graded thing, right? Like, probably by cheating in some way, or
but also
rigging the thing,
But also, that's okay. That's U.S. That's North America's goal, right? That's USA's goal, is to be number one, right, for education. But so they're gaming the system, like trying to like help themselves to have like the best, to get that number one ranking. But how does that help pump out super smart, creative people, right? That are like actually can do these things and create companies and ideas and businesses. You know what I mean? That's just helping them get a good grade. It's all around grades.
Yeah, and a lot of that, by the way, if you look at the higher education system, in the lab that I worked in at the City University of New York at the Hunter College campus, in my lab there, my mentor was from Israel. One of my another lab mate was from Israel. Another was from what is it? Ljubljana. I can't think of the name of the country, but like there were like I would say 90%. I mean 80 to 90% of my collaborators were just from other countries. So is that really good education system when it's run and populated at the top level by people from other countries? Is that due to the actual system?
Yeah, I would say it is. I'd say that's probably what you want, right? You want to attract the people who are the brightest, and education is built on smart people teaching others. So I have no problem with that.
Right. But at the same time, those people, the people got to where to that point through the education systems that they started with of their host countries.
Yeah, that's
fair. And if you looked at the people, we're just talking about higher education, which you can argue whether it's not, but the people in our education system that should be there, right? So like if I'm the only person from the one of only a handful of people from the United States education system in that lab, what does that say about the people from the US education system that they can get in there? And matter of fact, me also being a person who doesn't quite approve of the system as it is, so I don't know. It's complicated.
I think we just body slammed higher education. I'm kind of glad we did, because it needs to be shaken up. It's all good.
All right, John, tell us about what are some of the first steps that you would take actually to take on this idea.
So, I'm contemplating whether it's going to be like a virtual thing or not, but let's kind of like jump to it. We have the sponsors, it's free. We get people to jump in, and now it's day one, class one, whatever, right? I think the first step for an entrepreneurial school, business school, would be to start something and to teach people and talk them through that. Hey, it's like literally just let's have them guess on how they would start a company. Let's say it's a product company. I don't know. And like pair them off in teams or whatever, and let's go out there and start it. And they need to understand that there's so many like misconceptions about this, that like, how do you start a company? Well, you come up with the idea, then you go find like your co-founder, then you go get money, and then step 4 is you go build it. Step 5 is sell it, like sell the product, right, for revenue. And all that's not true. None of it's true, actually. It's all like, it's kind of like, it's a stupid metaphor or analogy, but it's kind of like planting, like, it's kind of like a garden where you plant a bunch of seeds at the same time, and you have no idea which one's going to pop first. Then you run with that, and you're like, okay, you focus on that, give love to that, but you're also trying to get another thing to pop. So like, you have to date a bunch of founders to see which one makes sense while you're trying to like Frankenstein this product idea, business idea together, right? While you're trying to go get money, why you're trying to go get proof of concept, which means you're talking to external people that might want to potentially buy it, right? Because your co-founder doesn't want to jump on board a product or a company that has nothing, right? Most of them, they want to see some concept. No one's going to buy it. No one's going to fund it without something, and they're not going to fund it without a co-founder, like a CTO or a CEO, depending on what which category you're in, right? Which bucket. So it's about doing a few things first at the same time. So you have to juggle and spin a bunch of plates. That's step one. That's a big step.
Now, are we saying this is a step for kind of the program that we're going to give to the students, or literally that's step one of us starting this education project, or both?
It's always both. Yeah. But I was thinking for the students, like once we're in the classroom setting, it would be, okay, this is what it's about. And, you got to go try a few things, and then one thing falls into place and you keep going.
So what's a way that we can get started, with an instructor, at least one or a handful, and a handful of students, where it's not going to put us in the hole too far, financially, or maybe we can even come out ahead in the first step, right? Is it like
starting this idea as a business?
Yeah, starting this idea as a business. So like maybe you go to, what's that? IBM. What do you think about like an IBM or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We team up. We come up with no business plan. Like that's terrible, but we come up with like conceptually, not on high level on paper, but we come up with some ideas and hey, we need a sponsor. We're talking to these sponsors. We want you to be the first one in. And here's what the idea is. It's this free, awesome school that's real talk, real education by doing.
And then go ahead.
Yeah. And then we're like, we know that we have a bunch of students that want to do this. And here's the plan, and here's this money you need to put in here, and you're going to be on it. And here's what you get back in return, right? You get all this data, you get all this access to these awesome students, and you can come in and check it out. Right. And then we have this awesome teacher. We got to go also at the same time, go recruit a potential professor, that would be great for this. And that's the easy part, I think, because all these heads of companies are, they can also help step in and be teachers too. So that they also want those students. Right. So I think it really comes together kind of quickly.
And the initial students, where should we get them from? Like, cause we could get them, you could go on maybe what would be considered the most difficult level of starting this business. You could go to some inner city area where kids are already struggling with things like, reading and math or whatever. And then you could say, hey, we're going to actually take these people. Or you can, I would almost consider it, it feels like cheating a little bit, but you could try to actually make it like a gifted program where, and maybe that's what we do. We go around to all the local schools and we say, send us your kids that are trying to sell stuff.
I really like that idea. I honestly think that's the best idea.
It's not a bad idea. And then, you just go to a handful of schools in your local area and you say, here's the criteria. You got a kid just selling stuff. Maybe you think it's a problem. Send them to us and we'll have an after school program for them.
Oh my God, I love this.
We'll get them involved.
I for real love this.
Yeah, sponsored by IBM, right? And then, but you don't get you can get someone from IBM to sort of talk to them and give them the spiel about IBM and how they might want to, one day sell their business to IBM or whatever it is. But then you get probably like a local entrepreneur as well. So to sort of be the instructor, and you can maybe actually pay that entrepreneur. It depends, right? Do they want to be a volunteer? Some people prefer that. Or you could now have a budget that IBM is giving you to bring in certain instructors.
I think we'll probably have, this is a great classic point of, you would probably have both, because in the beginning you need to try a bunch of things. I think we'll have some people, it's never a straight line. I think we'll have some people that are friendlies. They're like, yeah, I'll come in and help some classes out. And then we need to get what you pay for by getting the sponsors to come in from Facebook and Google and have the teachers come in that way as well. I love that idea of recruiting.
Now, what about the objection of, oh, Facebook's now teaching my 7-year-old, geez, like, weren't they deep enough into my life, Now they're sort of indoctrinating them into the Facebook system or the Google system or whatever. I don't know, for me, IBM sounds a little bit less intrusive just because they don't have like a social media, platform. But anyways, I don't know. What are we?
I don't think that we actually need to have these companies be that involved in the actual education itself. I think that it's a marketing expense for them to say that, hey, we are funding the next generation of entrepreneurs. And that's a rounding error on their balance sheet.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's totally true. Yeah, you just
I think we have
find
to figure out how early we go in the age bracket too, because 7 might be early. But there's
as early as kids are. So I say, well, maybe, you know, like, I don't know. Right now I'm living in this town called Elmhurst, Illinois, right? We actually had a previous guest who happened to grow up here. They have a pretty good education system here. There's a handful of high schools, grade schools, whatever. You know, you find a list of the schools, you go around to all of them, you say, here's what I want. Literally, just tell all your teachers, look out for kids that are trying to sell stuff. That's it. And then you see how old they are, right? Like, if there's a 6-year-old trying to sell stuff, you go, oh, okay, interesting,
it's
right?
going to be at the head of the class. Okay, the only
Yeah,
way to make this work is there's going to be some friction with the parents, right? Because they're like, well, I'm going to give my 8, 7, 10-year-old kid to you. We would need a stud on like the board, or the dean, and that would have to be like a Peter Thiel or like a Sergey or something like that. You know what I mean?
if
Like
you wanted to, yeah, you could try to aim. I mean, I think you could get away with just saying it's sponsored. I keep going back to IBM. I've done some things that are sponsored by IBM, so I don't know. I can see it. I have the vision of it really, really simple in my mind. But I think that ought to be good enough. But if you wanted to level it up, yeah, some other great. So you could go
get the exec
to
from Disney.
what's that?
The Disney exec for the younger kids.
Yeah, Disney. You could try to get these people like Peter Thiel on board. There's, what's it called? Singularity University is a very interesting resource to look up. Are you guys familiar with Singularity University?
No, I will be.
Yeah, so Singularity University was started by, I believe, two gentlemen. One is the guy who founded the X Prize, Peter Diamandis, and the other one is basically the guy who's like a huge futurist. He's worked for Google, invented the electronic piano keyboard and all sorts of other things. His name's Ray Kurzweil, and they have this thing that they call Singularity University, and it's basically like, let's just get people involved. It's not exactly like a university, but it does have that feeling of, you can take some classes, you can meet some people, you can network, and we want you thinking about 10x, 100x projects that are going to change the world. And I feel like you go to them and you ask if they want to be a sponsor or they want to be involved. And they actually, Peter Diamandis, for example, who I just mentioned, who started the X Prize, he just interviewed Elon Musk, right, about their carbon X Prize, the carbon removal X Prize. So there's connections there. If you could just get in with Singularity University and tell them, what you're planning on doing, they might even be able to connect you with others.
We're coming up on time here, but I've got to ask one hard question that we haven't talked about yet is, how do we actually make money on this business? Is it purely a nonprofit? As we had mentioned, sponsorship, and it's going to be free for the students, or is it going to be something that we take a cut of the sponsorship? What are you guys envisioning?
From my perspective is that we take a small cut so we can actually focus and put time on it. But it would be a labor of love, right? So we need the sponsorship money needs to fund the teachers, and then we get a small cut for operations,
And would we go non-for-profit or for-profit? Is there one that's kind of screaming out that's the best model?
I haven't thought of that. I think the best model would be a for-profit for the kids.
Right, just to kind of show them. You could even use it as a teaching opportunity to show them how the business is run.
Absolutely. I think knowledge should be rewarded, right? That's the whole point. That's the point for my company right now, Versus Game, right? It's the point for the education stuff, right? Let's do that.
Right. I think, you could get the sponsors from these large companies. Probably a little bit harder if you're a for-profit than a not-for-profit, because they have the tax deductions and they've got a specific budget for it. Maybe you could have two arms of it, a not-for-profit and a for-profit. But yeah, and then, just a portion of that funding that comes in can be, can go to fund the business. And you could take the Y Combinator model and say, actually, you get a stake in various businesses that these students start. That could be a way.
Another way of funding this that comes to mind is the charter school movement. Have you guys heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's essentially a way to create your own education system. You set the rules. You have to write this charter that the local government agrees to, and you still have to meet all these metrics around standardized testing, which maybe isn't as appealing, but it is an avenue to get some funding and have it be officially sanctioned. So maybe parents are not as scared about it. We are coming up at time here. John, where can people go to learn more about you?
Versusgame.com, and then Versus Game on Instagram. I'm all over that. So
tell us a little bit about Versus Game.
Yeah, it's a prediction game where you get paid if you're right. So people are predicting the outcome of culture, and that means different things for different people. And our mission is simple: knowledge should be rewarded. And so people are winning a lot of money, playing with their friends, and creating their own content. And that's really a big thing for us.
And maybe maybe if we have 1 second, I know you started this, and you were talking about planting seeds and things like that. You started this business, and it was mostly around the stock market, right? And betting on the various stocks. And somehow you kind of pivoted that it's more kind of like a pop culture trivia thing. Is there anything to share about that, again, just to give people a little bit of inspiration about taking this path of planting various seeds? Yeah.
I mean, when we first started this, it was like gamifying the stock market, leveling the playing fields. Most people can't enjoy the stock market, but it was just so confusing for people, and they couldn't wrap their head around it. And I was doing a crappy job of explaining it, and all that combined was like, you know what? I think there's a much bigger opportunity here, anyways, when it comes to culture. Stock market's in there, news is in there, politics is in there, crypto's in there. So you bring it all together. We just kind of leveled up, and then it became super clear.
Cool.
So, but we had to literally, I got so many no's and so many, what are you talking about? And no, that's not going to work. That I was like, wait, I think I'm thinking about this. I could think about it differently.
What's the most popular thing for people to bet on?
Music.
The outcome of music. And what about music? Like, what's going to be the most popular album, like top 100 or something?
Yeah. All the Billboard charts, like so many music games. Cause I think it has to do with vibrations and string theory. We're all connected and we're all vibrations. And I think heavily into like human behavior. But people are so passionate about music. And I think that's why, because how we're built.
Fascinating.
That could be an entire episode in itself. So
there you go.
But yeah, John, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Chat later on.
Thank you. You too.
All right. I'm going to stop the live stream here and hit Zencaster.